They say success is the best revenge, but total public destruction is a close second. Mark Vanderwall thought he had it all figured out. He had the corner office, the Italian sports car, and the perfect excuse to dump the woman who supported him when he was nobody. He told her she didn't fit his new tax bracket. He told her she was invisible. But 3 months later, at the biggest gala of the year, Mark learned a painful lesson. Be careful who you step on while climbing up the ladder, because they might be holding the one hand that can drop you. When the doors opened and the billionaire walked in, he wasn't there for business. He was there for her. The clinking of silverware against fine china at Le Bernardin usually sounded like music to Mark Vanderwall's ears. It was the sound of exclusivity, of Manhattan's elite dining on Dover Sole that cost more than most people's weekly grocery budget. But tonight, the sound was irritating him. He checked his Rolex Submariner for the 3rd time in 5 minutes. Across the table, Sarah Jenkins smiled nervously. She smoothed the fabric of her dress, a modest blue floral print she'd bought at Macy's 3 years ago. It was her special occasion dress. She looked at Mark, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of hope and anxiety. They had been together for 5 years. 5 years of Sarah editing his resumes, Sarah ironing his shirts before interviews, Sarah paying the rent while he finished his MBA. Tonight was their anniversary. Mark had been acting secretive all week. He had just landed the vice president position at Vertex Dynamics, a tech firm specializing in AI defense contracts. The salary bump was astronomical. Sarah was certain, absolutely certain, that the velvet box in his pocket wasn't a myth. "Mark," Sarah said softly, reaching across the table to touch his hand. "You've barely touched your wine. Is everything okay?" Mark pulled his hand away. The motion was subtle, but sharp. He took a sip of the Pinot Noir, swishing it around his mouth as if trying to wash away a bad taste. "We need to talk, Sarah," he said. His voice didn't have the warmth she was used to. It was the voice he used for junior analysts who missed their KPIs. Sarah's heart skipped a beat. "Okay? You sound serious. Is it about the promotion? Did something happen?" "The promotion is fine. Better than fine," Mark said, leaning back in his chair. He looked at her, really looked at her, with a gaze that felt like a cold scan. "That's actually the point. Vertex Dynamics isn't just a job, Sarah. It's a lifestyle. I'm going to be interfacing with senators, foreign investors, tech moguls. My life is about to change drastically." "I know," Sarah beamed, though her stomach began to knot. "I'm so ready to support you, Mark. I was thinking, with your raise, maybe I can finally take those graphic design courses and we can move to a place with a 2nd bedroom. Mark laughed. It was a dry, humorless bark. "See, that's exactly it. You're thinking about a 2nd bedroom in Queens. I'm looking at penthouses in Tribeca." He sighed, pulling a pristine white envelope from his jacket pocket and sliding it across the table. It wasn't a velvet ring box. "Sarah, look, you're a great girl. You really are. You were exactly what I needed when I was a struggling grad student eating ramen. You're comfortable. Domestic." "Comfortable," Sarah whispered, the blood draining from her face. "But I'm not that guy anymore," Mark continued, his confidence swelling. "I'm a VP now. I need a partner who reflects that. Someone who can walk into a gala and turn heads, not someone who looks like they wandered in from a bake sale. Someone with pedigree." Sarah felt like the air had been sucked out of the restaurant. "Mark, 5 years. I paid for your GMATs. I nursed you when you had pneumonia. You're breaking up with me because I'm not fancy enough? It's not just the clothes, Sarah. It's the mindset. You aim low. I aim for the stratosphere. We're simply on different evolutionary tracks. He nodded at the envelope. There's a check in there for $10,000. Consider it a severance package. Repayment for the rent you covered back in the day. I want a clean break. No crying, no scenes. I have a reputation to maintain. Sarah stared at the envelope. It felt like a slap in the face. She looked up at him, tears welling in her eyes, blurring the image of the man she thought she was going to marry. "You think you can buy me off?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I think I'm being generous," Mark scoffed. "Take the money, Sarah. Buy yourself a new wardrobe. Find a nice accountant or a school teacher. That's your speed." He signaled the waiter. "Check, please." As the waiter arrived, Mark stood up, buttoning his tailored blazer. "Actually, I have to go. I have a meeting with the board. You can handle the bill with the cash in the envelope, right? Keep the change." He didn't look back. He walked out of the restaurant, strutting like a king, leaving Sarah sitting alone in the middle of the busiest, most expensive room in New York, with a severance check sitting next to her untouched wine glass. She didn't touch the envelope. Instead, she picked up her phone. Her hands were shaking so hard she almost dropped it. She dialed a number she hadn't used in a very long time. "Hello?" A deep, calm voice answered on the second ring. "Liam," Sarah choked out, the tears finally spilling over. "You were right. You were right about everything." There was a pause on the other end, followed by a tone of voice that shifted from casual to dangerously protective. "Where are you, Sarah? And tell me exactly what he did." 3 months had passed since the night at Le Bernardin. For Mark Vanderwall, they had been the best 3 months of his life. His ascent at Vertex Dynamics was nothing short of meteoric. He was young, ruthless, and possessed a charisma that masked his utter lack of empathy. He sat in his corner office. Glass walls, view of the Hudson River, Italian leather furniture, and scrolled through his iPad. An article in Business Insider featured his face under the headline, "The New Guard, How Mark Vanderwall is Reshaping Defense Tech." He smiled, admiring the photo. He looked powerful. "Knock, knock," a sultry voice came from the doorway. Mark spun his chair around. Standing there was Jessica Thorne. Jessica was everything Sarah wasn't. She was the daughter of the company's CFO, a tall, striking blonde who wore Prada-like armor and spoke 3 languages, though she mostly used them to insult waiters. "Hey, beautiful," Mark said, standing up to kiss her. "Ready for lunch?" "Lunch! Mark, focus!" Jessica laughed, brushing a speck of lint off his lapel. "We have the Vertex Global Gala this weekend. Daddy says it's going to be the night they announce the new partnership with Sterling Corp. If that deal goes through, stock options are going to triple." "Sterling Corp?" Mark whistled. "I thought Liam Sterling was a ghost. Nobody has seen the guy in public in 2 years. He runs that empire from the shadows." "Well, rumor is he's coming out of the shadows for this," Jessica said, her eyes gleaming with ambition. "And you need to be ready. Daddy is thinking of recommending you to lead the liaison team. You'd be working directly with Sterling's people." "That's the fast track to the CEO chair," Mark said, his mind racing. "Exactly." "So," Jessica stepped back and looked him up and down. "We need to make sure you look the part. No distractions. No baggage." "I have 0 baggage," Mark assured her. "I cut the dead weight loose months ago." He thought of Sarah for a split second. He wondered if she was back in her small hometown, maybe dating a mechanic or crying over old photos. The thought gave him a twisted sense of satisfaction. He had won. He had escaped the trap of mediocrity. "Good," Jessica said, "because this gala is invite only, strictly A-list. Politicians, celebrities, Industry tightens. It's going to be shark-infested waters, Mark. I'm the biggest shark there, Mark grinned. Later that afternoon, Mark walked out of the office building and headed toward his new Porsche 911. As he unlocked the door, he noticed a woman walking on the sidewalk across the street. She was wearing a trench coat, dark sunglasses, and a silk scarf wrapped around her head. She was getting into the back of a blacked-out SUV. There was something familiar about the way she moved, a certain grace he hadn't noticed before. For a second, he thought it was Sarah. He scoffed out loud. Yeah, right. Sarah couldn't afford a cab, let alone a chauffeured SUV. That woman across the street had an air of mystery, of power. It was probably a model or a diplomat's wife. Mark revved his engine, drowning out the city noise. He drove off, completely unaware that the woman in the SUV had lowered her sunglasses to watch him leave. Inside the black SUV, the driver, a burly man with a military haircut, looked in the rearview mirror. "Ms. Jenkins," the driver said respectfully. "We have the itinerary for the weekend. The dress has arrived from Paris, and Mr. Sterling is flying in from Zurich tonight. He asked if you wanted to dine at the penthouse or go out." Sarah Jenkins took off her sunglasses. Her eyes were no longer red or puffy. They were cold, clear, and focused. The plain girl Mark had dumped was gone. In her place was a woman who had spent the last 3 months reclaiming an identity she had hidden for years to make an insecure man feel big. "Tell Liam we'll eat at the penthouse," Sarah said, her voice steady. "We have a lot of planning to do for the gala. I want everything to be perfect when Mark sees us." "Understood," the driver nodded. "And regarding the security detail for the event?" "Double it," Sarah said, looking out the window as the skyline blurred by. "Mark thinks he's walking into his coronation. I want to make sure he has a front-row seat to his execution." Back at his apartment, Mark was pouring himself a scotch when his phone buzzed. It was an email from the gala committee. "Guest list confirmation. Mark Vanderwall plus. 1. Jessica Thorne." He scrolled down the list of attendees, salivating at the names. Senators, tech giants, and there, at the very top, in bold letters, "Guest of honor, Liam Sterling, CEO of Sterling Corp." Mark took a sip of scotch. "Liam Sterling," he muttered. "I'm going to charm the hell out of you. And once I do, I'll own this city." He had no idea that the man he was planning to charm was currently sitting in a private jet, looking at a photo of Sarah Jenkins, and deciding exactly which parts of Mark's life to dismantle first. The stage was set. The invitations were sent. And Mark Vanderwall was walking blindly into a trap set by the very mediocrity he had discarded. The penthouse at 432 Park Avenue was quiet, save for the soft hum of the city 90 floors below. It was a silence that cost $50 million. Liam Sterling stood by the floor-to-ceiling window, staring out at the Manhattan grid. He was a man who took up space, even when he wasn't moving. At 32, he controlled a private equity empire that could topple governments. He was known in the business world as the silencer, because he didn't argue during negotiations. He simply ended them. But right now, the most powerful man in New York looked like a worried teenager. "Are you sure about this, Sarah?" he asked, not turning around. "We can just buy Vertex Dynamics tomorrow morning. I can fire him by noon. I can make sure he never works in anything other than a fast food drive-through for the rest of his life. We don't need the theatrics." Sarah Jenkins walked into the room. She wasn't wearing the Macy's floral dress anymore. She was wearing a silk robe that flowed around her like water. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun during her time with Mark, was now cascading in loose, glossy waves. She walked up to Liam and placed a hand on his back. He turned instantly, his hard expression softening the moment he looked at her. "Buying the company is too easy, Liam," she said softly. "Mark is a narcissist. If you just fire him, he'll spin a story. He'll tell everyone he was too innovative for the company, that he was a victim of corporate politics. He'll bounce back. He'll find another girl to use." Sarah walked over to the kitchen island and poured 2 glasses of sparkling water. "He spent 5 years making me feel small. He made me believe that his success was the only thing that mattered, and that I was just background noise. He needs to know that he didn't just lose a girlfriend. He needs to realize he threw away a winning lottery ticket because he didn't like the font on the paper." Liam took the glass she offered. He looked at her with an intensity that made her knees weak, a feeling she had never, ever felt with Mark. "I still hate that you did it," Liam grumbled. "The undercover experiment. You vanished for 5 years, Sarah. Your family was worried sick. I was worried sick." "I had to know," Sarah said, her voice dropping. Growing up as Sarah Sterling Vance, everyone wanted something. The money, the connections, the access to you. I wanted to see if someone could love me just for me. Just Sarah. No trust fund, no private jets. "And you found Mark," Liam spat the name out like a curse. "I found a man who needed me," she corrected. "Or I thought he did. I helped him study. I cooked his meals. I paid his rent with the money I made waitressing because I refused to touch my trust fund. I wanted it to be real." She looked down at her hands. "And the second he got a taste of power, he decided I wasn't enough. That's the answer I was looking for, Liam. It hurts, but now I know." Liam set his glass down and cupped her face in his hands. "You are more than enough. You are the most brilliant, resilient woman I know. You speak 4 languages. You have a double master's in art history and economics. And you have more class in your little finger than that entire ballroom will have on Saturday." He kissed her forehead. "Saturday isn't just about revenge, Sarah. It's about a homecoming. It's time the world remembered who you are." Sarah smiled, a dangerous glint returning to her eyes. "Then let's give them a show." Meanwhile, across town, Mark was in a very different kind of meeting. He was at a bespoke tailor on Madison Avenue, getting fitted for his tuxedo. "Ouch! Watch the pins!" Mark snapped at the elderly Italian tailor, kneeling at his feet. "Scusi, sir," the tailor murmured. Jessica Thorne sat on a velvet sofa nearby, scrolling through her phone. "Daddy says the seating chart is final. We are at table 2. That's right next to the podium. Prime real estate, Mark. Sterling is at table 1, obviously." "Table 2, Mark grinned at his reflection. The tuxedo made him look like James Bond, he thought, or at least a hedge fund version of him. "Perfect striking distance. I've been practicing my pitch. I'm going to corner Sterling during the cocktail hour. I read that he likes aggressive self-starters." "Just don't come on too strong," Jessica warned, though she didn't look up. "Liam Sterling is peculiar. He's incredibly private. No one knows who he dates, where he lives, nothing. He's like a phantom." "Phantoms are just men who haven't met me yet," Mark said, adjusting his cufflinks. "By the end of the night, I'll be drinking scotch with him." He looked in the mirror one last time. He saw a winner. He didn't see the man who was about to walk into a buzzsaw. Saturday night arrived with the kind of electric energy that only New York City could produce. The Vertex Global Gala was being held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Temple of Dendur had been transformed into a glittering ballroom of crystal, gold, and velvet. Flashbulbs popped like lightning storms as limousines pulled up to the grand steps. The red carpet was a sea of designer gowns and tuxedos. Mark Vanderwall stepped out of his limo, offering his hand to Jessica. She looked stunning in a red Vera Wang gown, though her expression was one of bored superiority. Mark, however, was beaming. He waved at a photographer who definitely wasn't taking his picture. "Showtime," Mark whispered. They made their way up the stairs, past the reporters shouting names of A-list celebrities. Mark felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was the world he belonged in. Inside, the great hall was buzzing. Waiters with silver trays circulated with champagne. A string quartet played modern pop songs in classical arrangements. Mark navigated the room like a shark. He spotted the CEO of Vertex, Jessica's father, holding court near the bar. "Arthur," Mark called out, walking over with a confidence that bordered on arrogance. Arthur Thorne, a grey-haired man with eyes like flint, turned. "Ah, Mark, you look sharp. Just ready to close the deal, Arthur," Mark said, winking. "Is Sterling here yet?" "Not yet." Arthur checked his watch. "His team is here. That's his chief of security over there." Arthur pointed to the burly man with the military haircut standing by the entrance, the same man who had driven Sarah's SUV. "Intense," Mark noted. "Mark," Arthur lowered his voice, "I want to be clear. Tonight is delicate. Sterling holds the keys to our expansion. If he likes us, we go global. If he doesn't, the stock tanks. Do not, and I repeat, do not make this about you. Let the product speak for itself." "Arthur, please," Mark laughed, brushing off the concern. "I'm the VP of sales. Making people like me is literally my job. I've got this." Mark grabbed 2 glasses of champagne and handed one to Jessica. They began to circulate. Mark tried to engage Senator Davies in conversation about defense budgets, but the senator gave him a polite nod and turned away to speak to a movie star. He tried to joke with a board member from a rival firm, but the man simply stared at him until Mark awkwardly walked away. "Tough crowd," Mark muttered. "They're just waiting for the main event," Jessica said, sipping her drink. "Everyone is on edge waiting for Liam." Mark checked his watch. 8 p.m. The dinner was about to start. "Maybe he's not coming," Mark said. "Maybe he's sending a proxy. That would be disappointing." "He's coming," Jessica said, her eyes fixed on the massive entrance doors of the Temple of Dendor wing. "Look." The music stopped. The chatter in the room died down instantly. It was a physical shift in the atmosphere, as if the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. The heavy double doors swung open. First, 4 security guards walked in, scanning the room with professional paranoia. Then, a hush fell over the crowd that was so profound you could hear the ice melting in the champagne buckets. Liam Sterling walked in. He was wearing a midnight blue tuxedo that fit him so perfectly it looked like a second skin. He was taller than he looked in photos, with a jawline that could cut glass and an aura of absolute command. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked straight ahead. But he wasn't alone. On his arm was a woman, and she was the one who stole the breath from every person in the room. She was wearing a custom gown that shimmered like liquid silver, hugging every curve before cascading into a dramatic train. Diamonds, heavy, flawless diamonds, glittered at her throat and ears. Her hair was styled in old Hollywood waves, and her makeup was impeccable, highlighting high cheekbones and striking eyes. She held her head high, moving with a regal grace that made Jessica Thorne look like a clumsy amateur. Mark, standing near table 2, squinted. The lights were bright, and the woman was facing slightly away from him as she descended the stairs with Liam. "Who is that?" Jessica whispered, sounding genuinely jealous. "I've never seen her. Is she a model? Royalty?" "I don't know," Mark said, entranced. "But she's magnificent." He watched as Liam Sterling whispered something to the woman, and she laughed, a clear, melodic sound that carried across the silent room. She turned her head to scan the crowd. Her eyes swept over the sea of faces, past the senator, past the CEO, and then her eyes locked onto Mark. Mark froze. The champagne glass at his hand slipped, tilting dangerously. He knew those eyes. He knew that laugh, but his brain refused to process the information. It was a cognitive dissonance so violent it made him dizzy. No, it's impossible. That's Sarah Jenkins, the girl who bought generic brand cereal to save 50 cents, the girl who wore the same winter coat for 4 years, the girl he had dumped in a seafood restaurant 3 months ago because she wasn't fancy enough. "Mark," Jessica nudged him. "Mark, you're spilling your drink. What is wrong with you?" Mark couldn't speak. He felt like the floor was opening up beneath him. He watched as the woman, Sarah, whispered something to Liam. Liam looked up, his dark eyes locking onto Mark with the precision of a sniper. Liam didn't smile. He stared at Mark with a cold, predatory intensity that made Mark's blood run cold. Then, the couple began to move. They weren't walking toward the head table. They were walking straight toward Mark. "Oh my God," Jessica gasped, fluffing her hair. "They're coming over here. Mark, straighten your tie. This is it. Liam Sterling is coming to talk to us." Mark wanted to run. Every instinct in his body screamed, "Run." But his feet were lead. The crowd parted for Liam and Sarah like the Red Sea. They stopped 3 feet away from Mark and Jessica. Up close, Sarah was even more breathtaking. The sheer wealth radiating off her was blinding. Jessica stepped forward, extending her hand, her voice trembling with excitement. "Mr. Sterling, it is such an honor. I'm Jessica Thorne, and this is Mark Vanderwall, our Vice President of—" Liam ignored Jessica's hand. He didn't even look at her. He looked only at Mark. "Mark," Liam said. His voice was deep, smooth, and terrified everyone within a 20-foot radius. "I've heard so much about you." Mark swallowed hard, his throat dry as sandpaper. Mr. Sterling, the pleasure it's mine." He tried to look at Sarah, but he couldn't bring himself to meet her eyes. "And your companion?" Sarah stepped forward. She didn't look angry. She looked amused. She looked at him the way a scientist looks at a bug under a microscope. "Hello, Mark," she said. Her voice was the same, yet completely different. It lacked the timidity, the eagerness to please. It was the voice of a woman who owned the building. "Sarah," Mark whispered, the name strangling him. "But how?" Jessica looked between them, confused. "Wait, you know each other? Mark, you know Liam Sterling's date?" "We're old acquaintances," Sarah said smoothly, a small cryptic smile playing on her red lips. "Mark and I used to share a cab occasionally." "Actually," Liam interrupted, placing a possessive hand on Sarah's waist. "Sarah isn't just my date. Mark, I don't think you've been properly introduced to the chairwoman of the Sterling Trust." Mark's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the table edge to steady himself. "The chairwoman—" "Yes," Liam continued, his eyes drilling into Mark. "The Sterling Trust owns 60% of Vertex Dynamics, which means technically Sarah is your boss's boss's boss." The silence in the immediate vicinity was deafening. Arthur Thorne, who had rushed over, turned pale. Jessica dropped her clutch. Sarah tilted her head. "I must say, Mark, I was reviewing the guest list, and I was surprised to see you here. I recall you saying that you needed to be surrounded by people of a certain pedigree. I hope the company tonight meets your standards." Mark opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He was drowning. He was burning. He was realizing that the girl he had thrown away like trash was actually the one holding the deed to his entire life. Mark stammered. Sarah, I didn't know. Clearly, Sarah said coldly. Well, Liam clapped his hands together, the sound like a gunshot. We have a lot to discuss, Mark. But first, let's take our seats. I believe they've moved your table. Moved my table? Mark asked faintly. Yes, Liam smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Table 2 is for executives, and based on the performance review Sarah and I just conducted, your status is currently under review. You're at table 84. It's near the kitchen. I hear the acoustics are intimate. Mark looked around. People were staring, whispering, laughing. Shall we, darling? Liam offered his arm to Sarah. We shall, Sarah said. She turned to walk away, then paused and looked back at Mark over her shoulder. Oh, and Mark? Don't worry about the bill for tonight. I'll cover it. Consider it part of your severance. She turned and walked away, the diamonds on her back glittering like stars, leaving Mark standing in the ruins of his ego, while the entire room watched him crumble. But the night was just beginning, and Sarah wasn't done yet. Table 84 was exactly as humiliating as Liam Sterling had promised. It was tucked behind a large decorative pillar, directly adjacent to the swinging double doors of the catering kitchen. Every time a waiter burst through with a tray of filet mignon, a gust of hot, garlic-scented air hit Mark in the face. Mark Vanderwall sat in stunned silence. His expensive tuxedo felt like a costume now. Beside him, Jessica Thorne was furiously texting on her phone. She hadn't spoken to him since the incident in the entryway. The other guests at the table were the overflow attendees, a junior IT intern who had won a lottery to attend, a retired accountant who was deaf in one ear, and a freelance photographer eating rolls as fast as he could. This is a mistake, Mark muttered, mostly to himself. It's a test, that's what it is. Sarah is testing me. She wants to see if I can handle pressure. Jessica looked up from her phone, her eyes filled with venom. A test? Mark, you dumped the chairwoman of the Sterling Trust in a seafood restaurant. You told her she wasn't fancy enough. Do you have any idea how much trouble I'm in? My father is going to kill me for bringing you. I can fix this, Mark insisted, adjusting his cuffs. I just need to talk to her alone. She loved me for 5 years, Jess. You don't just turn that off. She's doing this to make me jealous. It's a power play. I respect it, actually. Jessica stared at him with open disgust. You are delusional. The lights in the vast hall dimmed. A spotlight hit the main stage, where a podium made of frosted glass stood waiting. Arthur Thorne, Jessica's father, and the CEO of Vertex Dynamics walked onto the stage. He looked pale. He looked like a man who had just been told his parachute had been replaced with a backpack full of rocks. Ladies and gentlemen, Arthur began, his voice wavering slightly. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of a partnership, but in light of recent negotiations, it is actually a celebration of a new ownership. It is my distinct honor to introduce the new majority owner of Vertex Dynamics, Mr. Liam Sterling. Polite applause rippled through the room, though a murmur of confusion accompanied it. A takeover? Tonight? Liam Sterling took the stage. He didn't need the microphone. His presence alone filled the room. He looked out over the crowd, his eyes scanning, until they found the pillar near the kitchen. He knew exactly where Mark was. Thank you, Arthur, Liam said smoothly. Business is often about numbers, margins, KPIs, stock value. But at the Sterling Trust, we believe business is fundamentally about character. He paused, letting the word hang in the air. Recently, I was reminded of how rare true character is. We live in a world where people climb ladders by stepping on others, where loyalty is traded for networking opportunities. where people judge value based on the label on a dress rather than the person wearing it. Mark felt a bead of sweat trickle down his temple. "I have a story to tell you," Liam continued, his voice dropping to a conversational yet dangerous volume. There was a young executive, ambitious, talented. He had a partner who supported him when he had nothing. She paid his rent. She edited his resumes. She cooked his meals. And the moment he got his first taste of success, the moment he got a title, he discarded her. The room went deadly silent. You could hear a pin drop. "He told her she didn't fit his new tax bracket," Liam quoted, his tone dripping with disdain. "He gave her a check for $10,000, a severance package for 5 years of love, and walked out to meet his board members." Gasps were audible throughout the room. People were looking at each other, wondering who he was talking about. Jessica Thorne shrank into her chair, covering her face with a napkin. What that man didn't know, Liam smiled grimly, is that the woman he discarded wasn't just fit for his tax bracket. She owned the bank that printed the money. Liam turned and extended a hand toward the side of the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the woman who taught me that dignity cannot be bought, the chairwoman of Sterling Trust, and the new owner of Vertex Dynamics, Sarah Sterling." Sarah walked onto the stage. If she looked beautiful before, she looked like a goddess of vengeance now. She took the microphone from Liam, her fingers brushing his. "Thank you, Liam," she said, her voice clear and strong. She looked out at the audience. "I spent years hiding my identity because I wanted to be seen for me. I wanted to know if I could be loved without the Sterling name. And I learned a hard lesson. Some men only love mirrors. They only love what reflects their own ego back at them." She looked directly at table 84. The spotlight followed her gaze, swinging across the room and hitting Mark Vanderwall square in the face. He was blinded by the light, blinking like a deer in headlights, exposed to hundreds of the most powerful people in New York. "Mark Vanderwall," Sarah said, her voice amplified through the massive speakers. "You wanted a partner who could turn heads at a gala. You wanted someone with pedigree. You wanted to be the center of attention." She paused, a cold smile touching her lips. "Well, Mark, everyone is looking at you now. Are you happy?" Laughter broke out. It started as a few chuckles and grew into a roar of ridicule. The elite of Manhattan were laughing at him. Senators pointed, CEOs smirked. Mark couldn't move. He couldn't breathe. He wanted to slide under the table and die. But he couldn't. He was paralyzed by the sheer magnitude of his public execution. "Enjoy your dinner, everyone," Sarah said sweetly. "I believe the kitchen has prepared something special for table 84. Humble pie." She handed the mic back to Liam, and they walked off stage together, hand in hand, leaving Mark Vanderwall sitting in the harsh glare of the spotlight, the punchline to the most expensive joke in New York history. The dinner was a blur of misery for Mark. Jessica had left the table immediately after the speech, hissing that he was radioactive. The freelance photographer asked if he could take a picture of Mark for a blog about corporate failures, to which Mark responded by overturning his water glass. He had to do something. The flight instinct had passed. Now, the survival instinct kicked in. He was a salesman. He could sell anything. He just needed to sell his side of the story. He knew the layout of the Met. He knew there was a private VIP lounge near the Dender wing, where the high rollers went for cigars and cognac after dinner. Mark slipped away from his table while the dessert was being served. He loosened his tie, splashed cold water on his face in the bathroom, and gave himself a pep talk in the mirror. "She's emotional. She's hurt. That means she still cares," he told his pale reflection. Play the victim. Tell her you were scared. Tell her you pushed her away because you didn't feel worthy. Women love that broken hero nonsense. He exited the bathroom and bribed a security guard with the last $100 in his wallet to let him into the VIP corridor. He waited in the shadows of an Egyptian statuary. 10 minutes later, the door to the lounge opened. Sarah walked out alone, checking her phone. "Sarah!" Mark lunged out of the shadows. Sarah didn't flinch. She didn't scream. She simply stopped, looked up from her phone, and sighed. "I was wondering how long it would take you to corner me. You always were predictable, Mark." "Sarah, please! You have to listen to me," Mark pleaded, putting on his best puppy dog face, the one that used to make her forgive him when he forgot her birthday. "That speech, it was brutal. But I deserve it. I was an idiot." "An idiot is someone who forgets to lock their car," Sarah said icily. "You were cruel. There's a difference." "I was scared," Mark lied, stepping closer. "Sarah, look at you. You're royalty. Deep down, maybe I knew. Maybe I sensed that you were too good for me, and I panicked. I pushed you away to protect you from my own ambition. I didn't want to drag you down into my rat race." He reached for her hand. "But tonight, seeing you up there, I realized I made the biggest mistake of my life. Not because of the money, but because you're my soulmate. We can fix this. Imagine us together now. We'd be unstoppable. The VP of Vertex and the chairwoman. We could run this city." Sarah looked at his hand, then up at his face. She didn't pull away. She just laughed, a dry, humorless sound. "You really are incredible, Mark. You're rewriting history in real time. Protecting me? You told me I looked like I belonged at a bake sale. You threw a check at me like I was a prostitute you were done with. I was stressed. The job was getting to me." Mark grasped at straws. "Sarah, give me one chance. Just coffee. Let me show you the real me. The guy you fell in love with." "I did see the real you, Mark," Sarah said softly. "I saw him tonight. The real you is the man who treats a waiter like dirt because his water isn't cold enough. The real you is the man who dumps a woman on their anniversary because he thinks he can upgrade. The real Mark Vanderwall is a hollow shell painted in gold leaf." "I can change," Mark cried, his voice rising. "People don't change, Mark. They just become more clearly themselves." A deep voice rumbled from behind him. Mark spun around. Liam Sterling was leaning against a stone sarcophagus, arms crossed. 2 large security guards stood behind him. "Liam," Mark stammered, "this is a private conversation." "Nothing involving Sarah is private from me," Liam said, pushing off the wall and walking over. He towered over Mark. "And for the record, Sarah and I have been friends since we were 7 years old. I've loved her for about 20 years. But I stepped back because she wanted to try a normal life with you. I watched you for 5 years, Mark. I watched you ignore her needs. I watched you belittle her dreams. I wanted to punch you every single day for 5 years." Liam stepped closer, invading Mark's personal space. "So when you broke her heart, you didn't just lose a girlfriend. You activated an enemy with infinite resources. Is that a threat?" Mark tried to sound tough, but his voice squeaked. "No," Sarah interjected. She reached into her clutch bag. "This is a transaction." She pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was the check for $10,000 Mark had given her at Le Bernardin. "You gave me this to handle myself," Sarah said. "I never cashed it, but I did frame a copy of it. It hangs in my office to remind me never to settle for less than I'm worth." She ripped the check into tiny pieces and let them flutter to the floor like confetti between them. "We're done, Mark. And regarding your position at Vertex..." Sarah looked at Liam. "Oh, right," Liam smiled. "We're restructuring. The vice president of sales position is being eliminated, effective immediately. Your company car has already been towed from the valet lot. Your company credit cards were deactivated at 8 p.m., and security is currently packing your personal effects into a box which will be left on the sidewalk." Mark felt the blood drain from his face. "You can't do that. I have a contract. I have rights." "Read the fine print on the morality clause," Liam said. "Publicly embarrassing the parent company, that's us, is grounds for immediate termination with cause. No severance, no unemployment." "You're ruining me," Mark screamed, the mask finally slipping. "You vindictive, petty—" "Careful," one of the security guards stepped forward. "Go home, Mark," Sarah said, her voice tired. She hooked her arm through Liam's. "Or whatever you call home now. I hear the rental market in Queens is reasonable. Maybe you can find a place with a second bedroom." She used his own line against him, the final dagger. Mark watched them walk away down the marble corridor. He was alone. No job, no car, no girlfriend, no future. He looked down at the torn pieces of the $10,000 check on the floor. He fell to his knees, frantically trying to piece them together, scrambling like a beggar in the dust. But it was too late. The pieces were too small, and his hands were shaking too hard. The descent, the fall didn't happen all at once. It wasn't a quick drop. It was a slow, agonizing slide down a mountain of jagged rocks. The morning after the gala, Mark woke up in his Tribeca apartment. For a split second, he thought it was a nightmare. Then he saw his phone. He had 42 missed calls. None were from friends. 3 were from his landlord, reminding him that his corporate lease guarantee had been revoked by Vertex Dynamics. 5 were from credit card companies, notifying him of immediate account closures due to risk assessment updates. And 1 was from the leasing agency for his Porsche. By noon, the tow truck was downstairs. Mark stood by the window, watching his beloved 911, the symbol of his status, the metal shell of his ego, being hoisted onto a flatbed. A group of teenagers walked by, laughing and filming it on their phones. "Hey, isn't that the guy from the memes?" one of them shouted. Mark shut the blinds. He checked social media. It was worse than he imagined. A video of Sarah's speech had gone viral. It had 3 million views. The hashtag #JaHumblePie was trending on Twitter, accompanied by a zoomed-in photo of his face looking terrified in the spotlight. He tried to call Jessica Thorne. He needed an ally. He needed someone to tell him it wasn't that bad. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service," the automated voice chirped. She had changed her number. She had scrubbed him from her Instagram. To Jessica, and to the rest of the high society, he so desperately wanted to join. Mark Vanderwall never existed. 6 months later, the fluorescent lights of Gadget World in a strip mall in New Jersey hummed with a headache-inducing buzz. "I'm telling you, the box was open when I bought it," a large man in a sweat-stained t-shirt yelled, slamming a toaster oven onto the counter. Mark Vanderwall sighed, rubbing his temples. He was wearing a blue polo shirt that was 1 size too big, with a name tag that read Mark, Assistant Manager Trainee. "Sir," Mark said, his voice devoid of the smooth, sales pitch cadence he used to have. "The receipt is 3 months old, and there is a piece of burnt pizza stuck to the heating element. I can't refund this." "I want to speak to your manager," the man spat. "I am the manager," Mark said, lying. The real manager was a 22-year-old kid named Tyler, who spent most of the day playing games on his phone in the break room. "And the answer is no." The man grabbed the toaster and stormed off, knocking over a display of discount batteries on his way out. "Great," Mark muttered. He walked around the counter and knelt to pick up the batteries. As he was on his hands and knees, scrambling for AA batteries on the dirty linoleum floor, a pair of shiny Italian leather loafers stopped in front of him. Mark froze. He knew those shoes. He used to own a pair just like them. He looked up. Standing above him was Greg Miller. Greg had been a junior analyst under Mark at Vertex. Mark used to make Greg fetch his coffee and dry cleaning. He used to call Greg sport and steal his ideas for board meetings. Greg looked different. He was wearing a tailored suit. He looked confident. "Mark?" Greg asked, tilting his head. "Is that you?" Mark stood up, his face burning red. He dusted off his knees, trying to regain a shred of dignity. "Greg. Hey. Yeah, just helping out a friend who owns the place, consulting on retail logistics." Greg looked around the sad, empty electronics store. He didn't buy it for a second. "Wow," Greg said, a look of pity crossing his face. That pity was worse than anger. "Life comes at you fast, huh?" "I'm actually weighing a few offers right now," Mark lied, his heart hammering. "Thinking of moving to London. Private equity." "Right," Greg smirked. "Well, good luck with that. I just came in to buy a charger. I'm on my way to the airport. The company is flying the senior team to Zurich for the merger celebration. Everyone got a 20% bonus thanks to the Sterling takeover." Greg grabbed a charger from the rack. "It's amazing working for Sarah Sterling, by the way. She actually knows everyone's name. She promoted me last week. It's funny. She said she learned exactly how not to treat employees from her ex." Greg dropped a $20 bill on the counter. "Keep the change, Mark. Consider it a tip." Greg walked out. Mark watched him go. He looked at the $20 bill. He wanted to rip it up. He wanted to scream, but he couldn't. He needed the money for lunch. The final blow. Mark's lunch break was spent on a cold metal bench outside the strip mall, eating a sandwich he had made at home with stale bread. The wind whipped a discarded newspaper across the parking lot. It caught on the leg of the bench. Mark reached down to push it away, but the headline stopped him cold. It was the Sunday business section of the New York Times. The Billion-Dollar Heart, Sarah Sterling on love, leadership, and the merger of the century. Mark's hands trembled as he picked up the paper. There was a full-page photo of Sarah. She looked older, wiser, and breathtakingly beautiful. She wasn't wearing the flashy diamonds from the gala. She was wearing a simple white blouse, sitting in a sunlit garden, laughing at something off camera. He read the article, devouring every word like a starving man. "I think for a long time, I equated love with sacrifice," Sarah said in the interview. "I thought that if I made myself smaller, it would make my partner feel bigger. But I learned that the right partner doesn't want you to be small. The right partner builds a castle where you can both be giants." The interviewer asked, "There were rumors about a dramatic breakup right before you took over Vertex. Did that influence your leadership style?" Sarah's answer was printed in bold text. "It taught me the importance of value. Some people look at a diamond and only see a rock. They don't have the expertise to understand what they're holding. I don't blame them for their ignorance. I just don't let them handle my assets anymore." She didn't even mention his name. He was just some people. He was a generic example of bad judgment. Mark flipped the page. There was another photo. This one was of Sarah and Liam Sterling. They were walking on a beach in the Hamptons. Liam was looking at Sarah not like an acquisition or a trophy, but like she was the only person in the world. The caption read, "Liam Sterling and Sarah Sterling to wed this June at their private estate in Lake Como." Mark dropped the newspaper. It fluttered to the asphalt, landing in a puddle of muddy water. Sarah's smiling face stared up at him through the murky liquid. A realization washed over Mark, colder and heavier than the New Jersey wind. He hadn't just lost a rich girlfriend. He had lost a woman who would have stood by him if he lost his job. He had lost a woman who would have loved him if he was sick. He had lost the only real thing in his fake, plastic life. "Hey, break's over," Tyler, the manager, yelled from the store entrance. "Someone threw up in the video game aisle. You need to mop it up." Mark looked at the newspaper one last time. "Coming," he whispered. He stood up, buttoned his cheap polo shirt, and walked back into the fluorescent purgatory he had built for himself. The view from the top 4,000 miles away, the air smelled of jasmine and expensive champagne. The terrace of the Villa d'Este in Lake Como overlooked the shimmering dark water. The sun was setting, painting the Alps in shades of violent violet and gold. Sarah Sterling leaned against the stone balustrade. She took a deep breath, tasting the clean air. "You're hiding," a deep voice said. She turned to see Liam walking toward her. He held 2 flutes of vintage Dom Perignon. "I'm not hiding," Sarah smiled, taking a glass. "I'm just breathing. It's been a crazy year." "Regrets?" Liam asked, leaning next to her, his shoulder brushing hers warm and solid. "None," she said instantly. Then she paused. "Actually, maybe one. I regret that I spent so much time trying to prove I was worthy of love, instead of finding someone who just gave it freely." Liam turned to face her. He reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His touch was gentle, reverent. "Well," Liam said softly, "you have the rest of your life to get used to the free kind." "Is the guest list for the wedding finalized?" Sarah asked, changing the subject, her eyes dancing with mischief. "It is," Liam nodded. "And before you ask, no, we did not invite anyone named Mark." Sarah laughed. It was a full, rich sound that echoed off the ancient stones of the villa. "I wasn't going to ask. I honestly forgot he existed until you said the name." She turned back to the lake, looking out at the horizon, where the water met the sky. She thought about the girl she used to be, the girl in the Macy's dress, terrified of saying the wrong thing at dinner. That girl was gone. In her place was a woman who commanded empires, a woman who knew her worth, and a woman who was finally deeply loved. "To the future," Liam said, raising his glass. "No," Sarah corrected him, clinking her glass against his. "To the present. It's pretty perfect right here." They drank, and as the sun dipped below the mountains, the darkness didn't feel cold or scary. It felt like a velvet curtain closing on the past, leaving them alone in their own private, perfect world. Mark Vanderwall learned the hardest lesson of all. When you treat people like stepping stones, you eventually run out of ground to stand on. He chased the illusion of success, the shiny cars, the titles, the validation of strangers, and lost the reality of love. Sarah's journey from a heartbroken girlfriend to a billionaire CEO proves that your value isn't defined by how others treat you, but by who you truly are. Never underestimate the quiet ones, because they might just own the building you're standing in. What would you have done if you were Sarah? Would you have forgiven Mark, or was his punishment exactly what he deserved? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of karma and justice, please smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching.